I will, and so will you. Welcome, everyone, to the Motion Design Hotline. I'm Evan Abrams, continuing a conversation we were having backstage with
A very
Kyle
serious, very professional conversation.
That's how we do it. Every show starts in the middle. It's in media res, which is Latin for lazy plot construction. So this is the Motion Design Hotline, and no, it's not lazy. It's very complicated and clever when you start in the middle of things.
Yeah, I think it's Latin for in the middle of res.
Yeah, exactly, which is residence. So in the middle of your home.
Or resolution. See, I brought it right back.
Yep.
To something relevant.
Stand in the place where you live with us on Motion Design Hotline. We take motion design problems. We don't just riff about Latin. And we take your motion design problems, your After Effects trubs, and we try to solve them right here on the air. We're getting close to the holiday season, so I figured we would get nostalgic. So today we are getting into some FUI, some fictional, fantastical, fake user interface stuff. Well, it's one of my favorite things to do. So that's the...
Is it?
Well, kind of.
It's the first time we've done it.
Oh, yeah, we never talk about this on the show.
It is a great aesthetic, though, whether you're going back to, like, classic... I mean, they don't have to be sci-fi movies. They typically are. But if you go back to, say, sci-fi movies from the early 80s, even late 70s, because Alien, of course, is 1979...
Right.
But you go back to, say, Alien, Blade Runner, some other sort of formative sci-fi things. They are imagining versions of the future, but they're doing it circa 1980. So there's a very specific aesthetic there. And then more recently, we have the two that popped into my mind are Loki and Fallout that are imagining futuristic or, otherworldly sort of environments, but with a very 60s or 70s aesthetic.
Yeah,
so
they have like a technological arrested development of some kind that goes on. Yeah, or there's a movie called Prospect that absolutely rules. People should check that out if you like the idea of mining space flowers that poison you and
who wouldn't?
Cowboy stuff. It rules. Anyway, a lot of the plot centers around radios. Okay, so today that's what we're doing. I kind of got kicked into thinking about this because every depiction of Santa seems to be some version of like, oh, he's got a future sled. Oh, he's got a steampunk sled and all that stuff. Like, yeah, well, what if he had a Weyland-Yutani sled? What if he should be nuking the site from orbit? It's the only way to be sure.
The Futurama version of Santa is my favorite.
Yeah, all are naughty, all should be punished. So
I feel like that one does have a radar, but it's not,
definitely.
It's not super iconic in my mind.
It only picks up naughty people, but that's all people. So, hey everybody in the chat. Hello Robert, hello Umacorn, Cody, how's it going? Sean, what's up? And who? Oh, Ryan, holding it down in the chat over here.
And we have a Night Walker joining us on YouTube.
Hello. Well, terrifying. But it is the daytime, so we should be protected, at least where we are. So let's get to the screens. Let's have a look at what we are doing. And Kyle, I want to go to your screen first because it's more impressive.
Okay. Yeah, I did a whole thing. I did sort of an imagining of this show if it existed circa 1980.
Right.
Obviously, you'd be booting it up on, say, data cassettes or something like that. And you'd load up Hotline exe, and then you would navigate with your keyboard because a mouse doesn't exist yet. And this is how you would do animation examples to show people how things work. And I amused myself thinking of the concept of trying to teach people how to use After Effects on something that, I don't know, was this primitive. And then I went ahead and exported the full screen just so you could see it a little better. I'm sure the smaller one there maybe doesn't come through great on the stream. So just so you can kind of see what's going on. The animation, ultimately pretty simple, kind of out of necessity, right? But I'll be going through how I created the look and, the pixelation and just getting the vibes of the screen there.
Yeah, it's mostly vibes. Like a lot of this stuff is fairly simple, sometimes very manual, animation of maybe one or two tones or colors or hues or whatever. It's all it's all shape, right? It's all shape and a couple of colors, and that's what you get. So we gotta play within it. Okay, well, let's see what Evan's got going on here. I developed some radar screen here. Because as you know, NORAD continuously tracks Santa as a way of kind of flexing their nuclear disarmament powers to be like, tut, 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 we can indeed track Santa still, which means that they could potentially shoot Santa down if he ever becomes weaponized. So just something to be aware of, Santa. So the idea here was to produce something that was very procedural. So the blips are one thing, the sweeper line is another. So if the blips are doing something else, the sweeper is going to pick them up. So that's the idea, that you can produce something that is a little bit clever by sort of mimicking the systems that you want. So if in a narrative context you had like, oh no, the dots are getting closer to me, boop, 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 all you got to do is animate the dots and you're good to go. So that's the idea there. And then in my research about Christmas, which I like to do every year to learn something new about the holiday season, I discovered that there are alternative and rejected names for reindeer, and thought I would produce this type of a thing, which is, I guess, the status of reindeer in the middle of flight. So I guess you're supposed to hit these buttons to toggle these on or off or something. Or maybe it's...
Enable the various reindeer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all of this is driven by a friend of the show, Fractal Noise. So that's sort of how all of this goes. And these are the reindeer names as posited by L. Frank Baum, the Wizard of Oz fellow. And he believes that the reindeer should be called Flossy, Glossy, Racer, Pacer, Reckless, Speckless, Fearless, Peerless, Ready, and Steady. A total of 10 reindeer. He has a totally different cosmology of Santa that is insane, and also made into a competing Rankin Bass cartoon. So if you're ever interested in the history that never was, check out what he had going on. I think he kills an elder god in that, so check it out. Anyway, where to start, Kyle? What would be a good place to kick it off with?
I mean, I know that we have probably similar but slightly different stylizations. I could quickly talk through just some of the animation on mine, since I think it's pretty straightforward. Might be a good entry point for folks who maybe are newer to After Effects, and they can kind of see where some of that's going. And then we can both get into the way that we stylize the screen look, which is really, kind of the meat of what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I see Mike hanging out in the chat. What's going on, Michael?
Yeah.
Was producer of our rival program. So Kyle, we're gonna go over to your screen.
Cool. I will start out by giving a shout out to JP2793 over on Sketchfab, where I got this delicious IBM 5100, which was a real machine in the latter half of the 70s. This was one of the let's say one of, because the military definitely had things, but like the first portable computer.
I like that it has a Death Star on it currently.
Yeah, I thought that was a good choice. I felt a little sad covering that up, but I think it was pretty fun.
Kyle, a lot of Bothans died to bring us that information.
He did. And I'll drop this link into the chat, and that can get passed around. I've got a couple other things too. I'll go ahead and just do it since I'm here. Much as I would have loved to claim that I did the ASCII art title myself, there's a great site right here that will just generate that for you. So maybe I can show that more in a minute if I so desire. But Hotline is the best, right? So now you can make your own in about 1 million different typefaces, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I did want to shout out, if you are not a watcher of Texture Labs on the YouTubes, excellent stuff here. Brady, the guy who runs it, has an excellent screen styling tutorial through a really clever look. He does this in Photoshop, but if you are smart, you can bring that over into other such programs. So I'll drop that too. You should watch that. It's a great channel, well worth following. All right, so let's look at what I actually have going on in my animation, which is actually quite simple. We have a little bit of a thing typing on and a loading bar. This is very much nothing. It's just one thing selecting around, which is pretty easy to do. There's a couple different ways to do this. I did a way that made it pretty easy for me. And then again, just kind of bopping around. And then, hey, look, another preview bar. It's the exact same one. I just reused it. And then a couple times we're loading the screen on. Real straightforward here. So let me just call out a few things. I know that we've all done type-ons before. There's easy ways to do them. There's annoying ways to do them. I used the easy way by coming over to Effects and Presets and looking for one of the brand new presets that we have. There's been other ones, but Blinking Cursor Typewriter Console. That is a preset that just comes with After Effects now. Apply it, and then you will have some keyframes you can adjust and some properties you can adjust. You can turn the cursor on and off. You can set the speed, and then you get a lovely little thing like this that types the thing on and makes the cursor blink. I was running fast enough. You don't get a ton of blink, but there it is, right?
And what, I'm sure people are curious, what font is that?
Oh, yes. So this is OCR A standard, which is in Adobe fonts. So you can go find it there if you are so inclined.
Yeah. So, shout out to, I think Jake Bartlett provided this particular...
The typing preset? Could be.
Cursor, I think. There were a lot of collaborators during that during that period. Some people you're looking at right now have put a few in there. It's Christmas for everyone. But yes.
Then we've got our old friend loading bar here, which is another thing that a lot of people have done. This is not a crazy complex version of it. But so I have a bar right here, and I'll just open that up real quick. I thought the best way to do this was for us to have a gray version of this thing and then a white version that fills up. That's very sort of traditional. And of course, once we get to the composite, you can see you kind of get that, yeah. So there was a fair amount of this where I was kind of laying things out, and then I set up the composite, and then I kind of fine-tuned back in the original. So once I could kind of figure out like what level of gray gets me this look, right? So this bar, for folks who are not super shape layer savvy, it's just a rectangle in here for the gray. And then I made a duplicate of that rectangle and then made one more version of that thing using a merge paths, which you can get right in here. And so you can use various operators like add, subtract, or intersect, which is what I'm using here. And so then I've got that second duplicate of the rectangle where I can just move it right here. Let me turn my layer controls on. And so it's just moving from totally off of the other shapes to on top of it. And so that fills up that white bar. That's all it is.
Oh, yeah.
And merge paths is the thing that makes it so that that white one is only visible where they intersect. So there's your bar.
Right. Umacorn is asking, what was the name of that font again?
OCR A standard. There's a couple different versions of OCR, but I think there's OCR is what you should look for.
OCR font. I'm just going to type that out just so in case people miss it. But yeah, like there's like 1,000 ways to do progress bar. Like you might make a line and trim the path, but this method I really like because that allows like if let's say you wanted a slanted bar, let's say you wanted a different shape to the bar, like where two things meet is generally a good move if you want some flexibility in what that shape is. And once you turn it into like a trim paths, you lose positional data. So
yeah. And then again, there are a couple different ways to do this. I'll show you one of them in a second, but I just made a slider control that animates from 0 to 100. And then I linked my, this is on a text layer. I just linked the source text to that. And of course, doing this just by itself, you're going to get not quite what we want here because you're going to get this big, decimal number. So I'm going to type math.round and then put that thing that I just linked into parentheses, and now it will round that off. And that's great, but I would like to see the little percent sign after it. So inside the source text, you can just say plus, and then put something in quotes that you want it to show. So I'm going to put plus, and then in quotes, the percent sign. And so it's going to take whatever I'm feeding it and then add this other bit of text onto the end. I could put other stuff in here like Evan rules, and then it would say, number Evan rules after it. Pretty straightforward thing. Just so you know, you can take any property like this and just drag it up into your viewer, and it will create a text layer that says that thing also. So that's another easy way to do that. But again, I would have needed to do the other rounding and add the percentage. So easier to just build that myself.
Life hacks.
Yep. So this loading screen right here, pretty straightforward. It's literally just a black shape that moves out of the way to load things up. Just a little bit of curves here. You can see I didn't think having it be linear was quite right. It sort of loads fast and then like slows down a little at the end. So same thing here. I think I actually slowed down at the beginning and then it became almost linear as it went. But that's all this is. It's just a black shape that just moves off like that. Boop, boop.
As each of its 4 kilobytes loads.
Exactly. And so you get to this screen, and all we have here are some selections. I've kind of talked about some of this stuff on a past episode, I think, but the way this is done is with a little effects stack that takes, here, let me bring this back. So there's one version of the text layer that is just plain, and then one with the highlight. And then I'm using a text animator to basically turn on the chunks of text. Here, let me turn that, just so that only one line is visible. So that's all that will get highlighted with the effects. So,
Ryan is asking, is there any posterizing of time? Is there any frame rate limiting going on this thing?
A wee bit. In some cases, in not all. So that's a good eye here. I did posterize the time of this black-white, for example. So
that's how we know that the video feed is doing very well. People can perceive that there is
something. You can actually tell. This is another expression that we have definitely used several times on the show. You can use something called posterize time as an effect, or you can plug it in as an expression. So I wrote posterize time 8. So whatever this thing is, it's going to only do it, show it at 8 frames per second. And then I just said value. So I've keyframed this normally, and then I can say, take whatever you're getting and make it chunky so it looks like 8 frames per second. So if I disable this, you'll get a very smooth looking thing here. But then with that 8 frames per second, you get that kind of look.
Yeah, very not future.
Yeah.
The future is not smooth, it is clunky, and you have to tear the sides off of your pages.
So just to quickly do this, I love little text box, sort of a procedural text box like this. This is a little preset that I built off of a thing that a friend, that JC Tecklenburg posted on Twitter a long time ago. Use a fill, CC reptile, shift channels, and then CC composite to put the thing back on top. So basically you are taking your text and you're filling it with something. Doesn't really matter what. And then you use CC reptile, let me, here, to like kind of expand that out like this. And then you use shift channels with alpha to full on, and that will, boop, turn it into a black box. And so then your box can be controlled using the stuff in reptile. So you can set like how much padding you want around that block of text. And then CC composite puts the original thing back in front. So boop, there's your text on top. And then in my case, I just slapped an invert on there to make it so that it's black on white to match the rest of my look.
Yeah, this is a very cool type of thing, because then if you're typing out more things, or if something is, if something about the text is changing,
and you don't need another layer to be that box even, which is handy.
Life with fewer layers. 2025, fewer layers.
But you'll see all this is doing is just moving around the highlight. And then this is, same thing, loading bar, moving around the highlight, and then another instance of my same loading bar here. And I'm pretty sure that all of you know how I can move this thing across the screen a couple times. That's just some position keyframes. So I've got all that going on. Of course, the look here is what we're going to. Let me give you a little bit of my look, and then we'll throw it over to Evan for his. So there's a couple layers to this. I started out by really wanting to get the look of our pictures in the right ballpark. And I really wanted to do like a little 3-frame, like, of us talking, but it just didn't quite come together. But a little bit of mosaic and posterize here to kind of get that nice chunky look right here. So for mosaic, I set my blocks to 400 horizontal and 300 vertical. How did I come to those numbers? Well, my friends, I am using the old school actual screen resolution of 800 by 600 on my composition. So my mosaic is just set to half that to give it just a little bit of blockiness. And then I posterized those colors so that it would have that same kind of low res vibe. And then of course, up at the top of everything, I am just tinting everything to our brand yellow so that we get that lovely monotone look. And then I've got some other effects and other compositions, but that feels like a good time to throw it over to you. And then we can kind of see how you built yours. And then we'll come back and see how mine's different.
Perfect. Yeah, and back to Evan's screen. So, and if you don't like to do math, you can always just type in comp width, comp height in those things and divide by a number. That'll, in case you change your comp size.
I'm not going to be mean, but if you can't divide 800 and 600 in half, then After Effects might be a little challenging for
look,
you.
It's these are big numbers, It's 8 and so many zeros. You never know what could happen. But yeah, but also you can just ask After Effects to do your math for you, as I've been doing for a very long time. Like you can just type in divide by whatever. It's a good time. Anyway, so here's what I got going on. The Baum drive. Let's talk about this. Much less doing going on in here. So it all begins with this little AI, like AI is in Adobe Illustrator thing that was spit out. No, a real human named these reindeer like this, and that's what they came up with. So this is literally, if we just get our thing here, it's a bunch of black rectangles, white outlines. What font did I use? Oh man, hold on. I think I got that open somewhere. Let's for completion. Yes, good. Roboto Mono.
Yep,
There we go. Yep. That rhymes. Not Roboto Mono. That makes no sense. Why do I say it that way? So this is what we end up with. Now, you're probably asking yourself, Evan, why are the black boxes like that? Why is it not just a hole? Well, the reason is that I wanted to use adjustment layers to drive pretty much everything that's going to happen in here. That way I can just make adjustments and then change where the adjustments are happening, and that will animate, in quotes, what's going on here. So it's lowercase a animation. So we have a look at the old Baum drive. If we go into what is actually doing the animation, it's all down to this, what I've called the Baum drive selection mechanism. And it is essentially, if we just strip it back to the very beginning of everything, would you look at that, it's fractal noise.
Yeah, fracky.
Every time we Scooby-Doo into these things, we rip the mask off, and wouldn't you know it, it's fractal noise underneath every time. So I know that, and this is sort of a thinking backwards type of deal. I know that in the future times, I essentially want some of the buttons to be on, some of the buttons to be off. How am I going to make some buttons on and off? Aha, I will simply make a grid. That grid will be sometimes black, sometimes white. How do we get there? Okay, well, I need to generate stuff, so I simply generate fractal noise. So that's giving me a cloud of stuff. I need it to be blocks, therefore we put a mosaic on it. And if we slap it on here, it is a 2x9 sharp colors 2x9. Why 2x9? Well, because that is that'll cover up all the little blocks that I got going on right here, right? Does the math matter? Not really. It just has to be close because I've left myself a little gutter space all the way around so that I can kind of stretch this into the right place and then pre-comp it into this zone. And then a little threshold will knock us down into 2 colors. I'll leave the threshold at 128 because that's right in the middle center, and then I don't really have to play too much with the fractal noise, brightness, contrast stuff to make it do what I want. But essentially, if we just kind of rack this through, it's going to make different selections sort of randomly. And so if you're putting in FUI stuff that just has to be like widgeting around, it just needs to fill up some space while Kurt Russell is delivering some speech about the meaning of Christmas while being a cool, fit, older Santa, then that's all you really need. Or if it's like, oh no, the console's going crazy, bleep, 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 bleep. So you need to be able to kind of make that happen. So I've animated that simply using the random seed down here. The random seed is the universe that the noise lives in, and so we're just bumping it to different universes, re-rolling the dice. And in order to cause this kind of glitching effect, we're basically going from one number to a different number and then to a resting number. So like that. And then a more type of thing where we go back and forth. So we're going from 0 to 10 to 2 to 10 again. And then we're back to 2. And that's it. After that, I put the loop out offset on here. So we're going to keep going, repeat the last thing, repeat the last thing. And if we look at a graph of this, you can really see what this particularly means value-wise, that we're just repeating the pattern over and over and over again for all time and all space, and that is producing a new set, a blip, a new set, a new blip. Okay, so far so good, right? Everyone's on board with this.
I'm on board.
Okay, good. Jump on board the Baum drive, everybody. Which posits a world in which Santa Claus and the Wizard of Oz are in the same canonical universe. So the other little feature about this thing is that the top, the Rudolph bar, needs to be wider because we don't want to select half of the Rudolph bar. So I've simply snapped an adjustment layer down that covers up only that space and used transform to basically stretch this bar over. So it's a bit of a sneaky way to do it, but it gets you there. And no one will ever see this, so it doesn't matter. This is that swan way of thinking. So what do we do with it next, right? So we've got our Baum drive selection matrix. Well, we're just going to use it to reveal or hide various other layers. And so the first ones that I'm interested in, let's roll it back to where we've got just this selection, and that'll be it. So this adjustment layer is looking at the Baum drive selection, and we are using the Luma mat, Is it white? Is it black? Makes things on, makes things off. Be our guest, etc. And what is it doing? Well, I'm using the tint. So the tint is turning black to one color, white to another color. That's going to overlap with the areas that are here and not here. And kabam, we end up with that. So you could layer a whole bunch of stuff on here. So for example, what if we just inverted? Oh, that's working out pretty well. Maybe that's all you really need to do. Who cares? Maybe we invert and then we snap a tint on it. Nice. And I am deploying a CC composite on here to bring the original back in and use the Silhouette Luma to cut holes in this thing so that if there is activity going on behind, that'll show through. So from black and white stuff, you can make holes, but if there's no black and white information, you cannot, do much else with it. So sometimes it's good to just give yourself the tools for later use, if I can say that. That could be
you can.
Okay.
I'll permit it.
Thank you. So this is one set of things that's happening. Well, what's happening to all the other things? Should those just be black and white? I don't know. Let's have a look. Well, this adjustment layer is, again, looking at the Baum drive selection, and it's using a LumaMat, but it is inverted. So it's literally half of you get this, half of you get the other thing, right? So think of this like this is the default, and anywhere that's happening, the other thing isn't happening because I only have the two colors, basically. So if you ever have a binary thing, it's like this, except most of life is on a spectrum and a gradient. So mostly just in After Effects where we get to enforce binaries on things. So this has allowed us to snap those two. So now we've got basically two unique stylizations that you can then procedurally blorp around however you ding dang please. Thumbs up so far, right? On top of that, the thinking is, where does this go next? So where in the stack is this going? I believe we're coming up to the stylization part of the program. So this is where I start to drop adjustment layers on with like a curves, and maybe we snap on here maybe a more different curves as I'm trying different looks out and trying to make things the way I want. But I know that eventually I'm going to be sort of feeding this in as light behind stuff. So that's why my kind of stylization sort of begins here. And that is with some screen cuts that'll be chopping into this thing. So let me just go ahead and make sure that we can actually observe stuff. So I am using a mosaic and some Venetian blinds to make these holes. Oh, Kyle, I almost forgot one very important thing.
Uh-oh.
So while we can indeed just use adjustment layers, you can also use this idea to add a little animation to some parts of this. So you see this like little pulsing situation? Well, that's being done using a shape a layer. And the shape layer is just doing this type of thing. And it exists in this whole grid.
In all of them, but you're using that same visibility trick there.
Exactly. The Baum drive here is, the Baum drive selection is saying, where should that be happening? So you can layer other things on top of this and under things. And because, again, it's just adjustment layers that are sort of doing changes to stuff, that's why the change is also happening to that black and white object that existed below. So always keep that in mind, that if you're working this way, it doesn't all have to live on one layer. It can be, as some have suggested in the chat, more layers.
And since obviously this is a couple of years old at this point, but since you can use a single layer as a mat for multiple other layers, it makes it easier to do something like this, where you have one layer that drives the visibility of a couple different things.
Bingo, bango, ha-ta-ta. So speaking of visibility, let me show you how the radar thing got done, because everything gets a little stylized after that. The radar here is working on a similar principle of many layers observing the same matte layer. So it can be really helpful when you're trying to sort of create this type of thing, that we simply just make stuff. By that I mean, these are the objects that are flying around. A nest of, we'll say, naughty and nice things out there. Or maybe they're different Santas, if you believe in a multiverse of Santas. So maybe that's what's going on.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, it only
some
makes...
of them are the evil Santas, and some of them are the good ones.
Exactly. Yeah. There's ones who deliver coal to good people, etc. So whatever it is, whether it's planes or aliens or whatever, if you can just animate something that represents those in the fake interface, solid. Great. Now, where should that exist if this is a radar that's kind of pinging off of them? Well, that's where we have a sweep. So here is the visible version of that sweep, and I'll show you how it's built. Just go all the way back to the beginning of how this is done. So step one is just make a solid. And this solid, I've gone ahead and made an equirectangular, so it's twice as wide as it is tall. And I apply a gradient ramp to it. And we can't see it right now, but I'll just hit the old reset on that. And it's a gradient ramp. And
I believed you.
Yeah. And it's going from this corner here to that space there. And then I deploy a polar coordinates on here, and I'm using rectangular to polar, which turns a rectangular thing into a circular thing by warping space and time like that. Which I think one time someone said that that's not what that's for. It's like, it's for whatever I use it for, man.
Yeah, it's a great way to turn when you need to make a circular thing and you're not sure how else to do it, make it as a rectangle and slap polar coordinates on it.
Yeah.
It
And
works.
this is great for any kind of like radial stuff. Now, the other thing that I really like about this is that you are then able to sort of bend this kind of line because of the way that swirl happens. So anyway, you get a lot of interesting kind of control over this. And then finally, let's snap a levels on there just to pinch, because obviously we're dealing with a linear type gradient. So maybe we want to mess that up. Maybe you want to use a curves or something, because you want like a tight band here, and then it gets looser and whoopier as it goes. Okay, so we have a sweep going around. We got a sweep, and then we've got a bunch of blips. So remember, the sweep is black and white information. The blips exist, and we want this to reveal those. So I've just gone ahead and used, time times 180 on the rotation to get this thing spinning around. Look at it go. And then I duplicate it and parent and shut down the other one so that we actually have a second sweep. So one is the visible sweep. The other one is the matte sweep. So this has a gradient that's just a little bit different. Its levels doing a different thing, same polar coordinates, but there are many ways to generate this. You could be using radial wipes. You could be using layer styles. However you get here, it doesn't matter. We just need black and white information wrapped around a circle. Okay, so far so good. Those two things are twirling away at the same time. Therefore, if these layers observe that matte, and we observe them as their luma, so they show up where the whiteness is, then we are going to get, show this, only show these little buddies showing up and then fading away as it goes. Ooh, pretty nice, you might say. So after that, it's really just about layering other stuff on top of this to either bring them forward or suppress. So for example, can I interest you in an echo? Bloop. So if we're putting an adjustment layer over top of all these, don't work harder than you have to. We put the echo over top of them. We put a little ghost in the house blur. We put a levels. Maybe we put a glow so that the parts where these things are overlapping is going to get pretty heavy. So this is like, it's giving us kind of radar ghosts or radar echoes that I'm trying to achieve. It's close. I didn't quite get to the scientifically accurate radar, but whatever. That's for me to think about when I try to sleep at night. But there we go. We got blips on the radar, and they shouldn't be different colors because that's not how our radar works. But then what's I going to do with this? Nothing, I suppose. Then it's just a matter of kind of layering on other things that you want to kind of exist here. And then what else you might desire to make it as messed up as you want. But speaking of making it messed up, Kyle, let's go to your screen. Let's talk about messing stuff up. And
okay, fair enough.
Comping this stuff together.
We did have a question in the chat from Ray about where to find a list of expressions. And this suggestion was dropped by Robert, which was excellent. aereference.com/expressions is a good place to find a lot of them. Also, anytime that you create an expression by alt-clicking one of these stopwatches, you do have this flyout menu here that will show you literally everything that you can put into an expression. I don't know if it's super helpful to just see these listed, but they are all there. If you want to learn about how to use any of these, there's an excellent free series on YouTube called World of Expressions. So just give that a search. You do have the opportunity to go to this guy's page, Animoplex, and give him $10 or something if you want. He's a nice guy. I recommend it. If you want to get real serious about expressions, School of Motion has a course. Happens to be starting in just a few weeks. So I recommend that too. So let's talk about making stuff look old and chunky. As it happens, our friends over at Maxon, hi Michael, just recently released another effect called pixel dither, which gives a lot of these just super delicious old school dithering effects, which tends to be very much what you're after in these instances. So if you have access to Red Giant effects, check this out because it's probably going to get you exactly what you want. I'll just drop a quick demo of it here. I'm not going to get too into the weeds because we need to show you how I built ours, but I will just create a quick adjustment layer. And let's maybe take both of these circles here just so that we have a little bit more to work with. And we'll kind of move Evan and I, just our typical branding portraits here. And there's a couple different kinds here. So I'll just grab the halftone dither and drop it onto that adjustment layer, and bing, bang, boom. It's just going to make this look old and chunky for us. You get all kinds of stuff. Let's turn this way down to 2. There we go. That's pretty much the look we're after, right? And then you can kind of decide the brightness of the thing and deal with some of that saturation. So, just by dropping this on here, it's pretty easy to get almost exactly to the look that I got with several other effects stacked up. You, of course, have a dashboard and you can browse through here. There's a couple different kinds of this, so you can really dial in exactly the look you're after. It's good stuff. I played with it. I have some other examples that I'm working on, maybe not for the show, that are using exactly this, so check it out. But for my example, so you already saw that I did a little bit of mosaic here to make our pictures pretty chunky. And I'm tinting everything, right? So to then get that to actually look more like a screen, I've layered up a couple things. There's a few ways to do this, but I just used the grid effect set to 2 and 2, and then the border set to 1. If I set it higher, it would, blow everything out. But look at that. It's just a black grid, and it takes everything down to pixels there. Easy peasy, right?
That's it. That's all, folks.
That's
one
it.
grid.
Yep. And then I thought it was important to add a little bit of kind of like it's subtle on the final one, but a little bit of a kind of like refresh sweep. So I just have a very simple, let me turn this up. You see it's at 4% opacity, so I'll just turn this higher. There we go. It's just a little gradient band that just runs through here using the offset effect, which of course is a great way. We've talked about this, I think, just last week. Great way to make something kind of run continuously. So, and then I'm just tinting that again. This is just a white and black gradient. And then I made a second version of that that's just offset so that we'd get 2 of them running. You probably can't even see on the stream because this is so subtle. But once this gets filtered through the other effects that we're doing, that 4% opacity is exactly what this needed. So there we go. Turn those back off. So, this is already looking pretty good, but we really need that kind of slight glow, a little bit of like almost pixel bleed vibe. So the way that has been done, again, hat tip to that Texture Labs tutorial, because I'm basically doing a variation on his technique, is I'm taking just another version of that composition. I'm using, again, I've got all these opacities very low because they become really touchy when you start feeding copies back to each other here. These are all just that previous comp I was in. These are all just that pre-comp stacked up. So there's that composition. I used extract so that I could pull out the black, and I'm only dealing with the white versions, the white pixels here. Looks pretty gross here, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be good even. And then as a way of having a controlled blur that only moves in one direction, drop shadow is exactly that, right? So you can apply a drop shadow and you can make it soft if you want. You can make it crispy if you want, but you can push it in one specific direction. And then I've just stacked up a couple iterations of drop shadow. And if you were to look at the numbers, each one is a little less opaque. They get potentially a little softer as you go. Nope, not on this one. I kind of varied it up on the different ones. But look at that. You get that lovely kind of like chunky blurring right there. And then when you start compositing that, I've got this one set to add. So let's composite that over our original here and then turn that back down to the opacity that it's supposed to be, which is 11. Look at that. You get that nice little pixel ghosting just in one direction, okay? And so then I've just layered up a couple versions of that here. So here's another version of the real footage because I kind of needed to darken things back up once I got these other glows on top of it. And so it's subtle again, but you get that nice little, like every pixel that's supposed to be there kind of has some little friends, a little bit of banding like off in both directions, just very slightly. And it really gives it that kind of worn, weathered look, even here on this digital screen.
Right.
So
it's probably worth explaining, like, for people who didn't grow up around CRT TVs, these are a series of tubes. And they're tubes that transmit light, and that means if you have a bright light next to an off light, they bleed into each other.
Yeah. So, and especially over time, things are going to start wearing down, becoming a little less precise.
Yeah. And so when we play kind of pixel art video games and the pixels are super crisp, that's not the way it looked on a CRT monitor.
Right.
The light bled into each other, and all of that dithering actually became smooth transition of color from one thing to another. So when people are like, "Oh, I remember Sonic looking a lot better," like, yeah, you're remembering it correctly because the monitor itself made it better by mooshing these things together.
Well, and by being, if you're playing a game designed for NTSC, which is roughly half the resolution of the HD monitor or more that you're watching it on now, like those pixels looked better because there were fewer of them on the thing that you were looking at them on, and it was a lot smaller, so it was much more forgiving.
Yeah, it's some wild stuff. Yeah, good for us to resurrect the old vanilla drop shadow for people to enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I use drop shadow all the time. You just just don't use the default.
Yeah, just put like 20 of them on there, it's totally fine.
So to kind of finish this off here, again, there's the thing you just saw me make, dropped into another composition as a pre-comp here. I used extract again, just so I had sort of control over exactly the brightness. I dropped a background here that is just a very slight gradient. See gradient ramp here. Very subtle, again, turned way down. Some noise so that it gets nice and grainy in here, and then a little bit of that tint so you get a little bit of a gradient on here. Again, if I turn that way up, you'd see it's much more, much more severe. And then there's my comp over this. There's, of course, a little bit of our old friend glow on here to kind of soften things up again. If you have access to a third-party glow, you can do all kinds of great stuff. But in this case, the regular glow, just kind of adjusting some settings, this is only down at 0.2 intensity, because beyond that, it starts blowing everything out so much that it doesn't even matter anymore. You just want a little kiss of it sometimes. That's just enough to really kind of bring everything together. And then I have this little bit right here where I'm using a very similar strategy to what Evan was doing here. I made a fractal noise layer that I ended up even just keying the opacity of it, so it only happens a few times. There's an example of it, just big, blocky, chunky noise. And then I have 2 copies of that composition that you saw me build, and one of them is offset 2 pixels to the right. And so that when I occasionally get those blocks, we get a little like screen tear error right here. And it's some of those little kisses that are just really subtle, but they get the job done. There's another one, you can kind of see it really well right there. Just enough to kind of like give it that worn vibe. And so this is the end of my screen composite. I did do some other work to composite into this screen and do some lighting. This is that 3D model that you saw me toss out there earlier, but we've talked about that a lot on other episodes, so there's not really too much else going on. I just took a little time to position this properly relative to the model and a little bit of camera work.
Right. Well, let's have a look at the rival methods for almost all of those things that you said. So instead of a grid, I went ahead and used a very different method. I used a pair of Venetian blinds. So Venetian blinds is used to just slice away a percentage of horizontal or vertical or whatever angle of line, right? So 75% of 4 pixels in one way, and then what did I do? Roughly 75% of pixels going in another way. However, the reason that I tend to use it on this method is that I like to be a little sneaky sometimes, and I'll say like, all right, 50 by 50, but oh wait, we're not gonna have even slices anymore. We're gonna widen some of those, and I'm gonna feather out some of my horizontal ones, or I'll feather some of my vertical ones, right? I find that this gives me a little bit more manual control to dial in just the oblongedness of incorrect monitoring of stuff.
Plus, you get a feather on there, which is potentially nice.
That's true. An asynchronous feather, right? Like I can have in different ways, which turns each of these into a little, what I imagine to be a little LED diode type of thing. Anode? I don't know. Let me know in the chat. So the idea here, though, is this is going to look pretty faded because I'm chopping away like half of the pixels. But don't worry, because it's going to then get totally blown out when we smash multiple copies of it over top of each other with add. And I tend to start with what I call the sharpest version of this. And then I layer on top of that. I just duplicate it, make another one. And I offset it using I make it a 3D layer. And I'm either pushing it forward or backwards, ahead or away from the viewer, as if it's receding into the darkness. And then we have another one that's kind of doing the same thing. It's like an echo going off into the machine. But then to nastify them, that's a word, to make gross, I like to deploy onto this first a little curves to make it just slightly different. Actually, let's, can we really see it if I solo it? Kind of. Gets a little blurry. Don't get too blurry. It might get too blurry. But I like to put a fractal noise in the mix. And fractal noise can be set to a multiply blending mode that if we are using these layers additively, by multiplying, putting the dark patches of the fractal noise here in the mix, well, what we end up with, and it's pretty subtle at this juncture, but you can start to see how it's putting kind of random crud in the mix. And that crud starts to really show up when you start to blow it out with glows, because the glow is picking up things at a more mathematical level.
I mean, that's how I was had all these layers at 11% and 4% and stuff. Because when that gets fed in and then glowed, that 1% starts making a difference on that stuff.
Yeah, because you can see those areas now when the glow threshold is quite low. And if we kind of crank it up, then we start to get in different areas. So that'll create what we think of like an unevenness. And the other thing that's your friend is things like your noises, your grains. Noise HLS, HSL, one of those two is the correct order. I could check, but I won't because we have to say goodbye. Those are all great things to just muddy the waters on here and to get little chunky bits of texture in there. If you want more texture in your life, keep it here on the Motion Design Hotline. Wednesdays at noon Eastern time. That's when we do this. You can connect with us all around the internet. If you have troubles and you want to get at us, you can always reach out to us. You can find us on social medias. So you can get us on Instagram. You can get us on Blue Sky. Less and less on Twitter because it doesn't seem to be particularly reaching people. But those are kind of the big places you can find us. But always, motiondesignhotline.com. I'm Evan Abrams at EC Abrams. He's Kyle Hamrick at Kylosaurus Rex.
That's me. And of course, at motiondesignhotline.com, you can also get these project files. So if you want to dig into what we just did, you can play around with it yourself.
Yeah, and it's, rock the rails, move the sliders, spend an afternoon dialing this in exactly how you want. That's what I did. So it's a good fun use of your day. Speaking of a good use of your day, keep it here on Adobe Live. Said it right that time. And there's a rich full day of programming gonna be a rich, full week of holiday programming coming up next week, I believe. So keep it with us here and there and then. And yeah, that'll do it. We better run along and let y'all get on with your day. But till then, stay creative, be kind to each other. We'll see you all around the internet. I don't know. Anything you want to tell the good people, Kyle?
Just thanks for watching. Make cool stuff. That's the whole point, right?
We demand it. And if you do make cool stuff, share it with us. We want to see it. We want to big up what you do. So if you go ahead and make retro futuristic stuff, show it to us.
See it. And happy to share it.
Yeah, and always tell us the amount of like fiction that goes around it, because we really want to know the narrative.
The lore is important. Yes,
the lore is important here as always. All right, that'll do it. So bye for now, everyone, and we will see you all around the internet.
Thanks, everybody.